Didn't do too well when it came to the fuzzy-wuzzy hair, I'm afraid, earlier. So glad it's not just the outward appearance. Last week, I was with Anna, my wife, we were down in the southeast of England, visiting various relatives, ancient and modern tour, from granddaughter Lara, who is aged 2, and the number of times we heard her say, I do it, right through to elderly cousin John, who is 90. His legs are a bit dodgy, but there's nothing wrong up here. But John, bless him, has a difficult week coming up because on Wednesday it's his wife Ruth. It's her funeral on Wednesday, and she was a lovely Christian woman. Apparently, I never met her. I hadn't seen John. Well, he saw me when I was 2 years old, so a long time ago. But Ruth, apparently, John was telling me, before she died, she was very ill and at home, but, it was okay up there. And there was a parade coming to see her of children. I think there's 4 children. I can't remember how many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There were 25 great-grandchildren all coming to see her. And for each one of them who came, she had a very special message, as well as all the, the usual I love you stuff. She said to every one of them, at the end of a long life, she said to each one, follow Jesus. That was her message to all of the children, the grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Follow Jesus. Great message. We heard our readings, and thank you, Non and Emrys, well done on that reading about what Paul wrote. Thank you, Emrys, about what he wrote to the Colossian Christians many hundreds of years ago. And what he said, we can sum up, I think, in those 2 little words, follow Jesus. What does it mean to follow Jesus? Those aren't the words that Paul used. He used other words. He talked about being with Christ, about Christ who is your life. You see, being a Christian, being a follower of Jesus, is about having Jesus in your life, knowing him. There's lots of different ways of saying that, of describing it. But if Jesus is in my life, and if he's in your life, that means something for the person I am, and the person you are, and how I live, and indeed the same for you too, how you live as well. What does it mean, follow Jesus? Well, let's begin by thinking about clothes. A few weeks ago, I went to something called a Gordy in my old college. There were friends from my year at university and other years, but we ignored those. And for this, we had to dress up in our penguin outfits, the black tie jobber. And I found mine. And guess what? In the years since I had last worn it, the trousers had shrunk. And the same had happened to my nice white shirt as well. And no matter how much I breathed in and tried Oh dear, I had to go and get new ones. I had that look from Anna as well. And you know, funnily enough, the same thing had happened to most of my friends who were there as well. Isn't it funny how their trousers had also shrunk over the years? The serious point is this: these clothes didn't fit who I am now. And in our reading from Colossians, Paul talks about some things that don't fit if we want to follow Jesus. So he gives us a list of 5 things, of things in verse 5, which my son Andrew tells my granddaughters. He says, those are bad choices. They end up with greed. Not just about food, of course. In Dutch, the word for greed is hebzucht. It means wanting to have. Great way of putting it, isn't it? Hebzucht, wanting to have. If we want to follow Jesus, then being greedy, wanting to have, is something that simply doesn't fit, like my old trousers. And he doesn't stop there with things that don't fit, because actually, sadly, there's quite a lot in that old wardrobe. Verse 8, anger, wrath, malice, slander, abusive language from your mouth. Sometimes people talk, don't they, about bad-mouthing others, saying things that are not kind, or telling a story about someone that might be nearly true, but makes them look bad. Oh dear. There's lots of ways we can talk about people. And that can be true whether we're very little, like Lara, or very old, like John. I can say that about him. He's in Eastbourne. But Paul sums it up in verse 9. Do not lie to one another. If we want to follow Jesus, you see, lies don't fit. Truth does. Here's a question for the grown-ups. Who said, truth is what is to the advantage of your own people? Truth is to the advantage of your own people. Does anyone come to mind? Actually, it comes from, I didn't really expect anyone to know the real answer, it's from the Ministry of Internal Affairs in Germany in the 1930s. It's scary, actually, how people today talk about fake news and my truth, which is different from your truth. Truth is what is to the advantage of my or our people. But if we want to be followers of Jesus, what fits is being people of truth. Careful about how we talk about others. Careful that what we say matches who we are. The sad thing is, of course, that in a church, or indeed in any community, lies, bad-mouthing people, these things divide people. We know this, it's also true in school, isn't it? If you say bad stories about people, it divides among our neighbours. But that sort of thing doesn't fit if we want to follow Jesus. In his letter to the Colossians, Paul talks about some of these divisions. Everybody knew about them. There were the Jews who looked down on the Greeks because they were not God's chosen people. And that wasn't a problem for the Greeks because they looked down on the barbarians because they didn't speak Greek. Do you know where the word barbarian comes from? It comes from the Greeks thinking about their language, which sounded to them like barbarian. Yeah? That's actually where it came from. But the barbarians didn't care because they looked down on the Scythians who came from up north, the north part of Greece. And they were totally uncivilized. My dear, you really have no idea how dreadful they are. And no doubt there were those that the Scythians looked down on. And then, just for good measure, Paul threw in the biggest economic and social divide of all. He talked about those who were free and those who were slaves. So you've got a divided world. But in Jesus, it's different. In his church, in his community, in his people, it's different, or at least it should be if we follow Jesus. Anna and I love going, as we did last week, to my son's church in Penge in South London. There is such a mixture of people there. All shades of colour, all ages, those with no qualifications right through to those with PhDs, those who are sociable and articulate right through to those who are grumpy and don't want to talk to anybody. It's a real microcosm of difference brought together, people who want to follow Jesus. I'm not saying it's a perfect church, far from it. I know that because Andrew, my son, is on the PCC, and he knows quite a lot. He's treasurer as well. But it's a sign of God's kingdom. There's enough there to show a real sign of what God's kingdom is, a sign of the difference that Jesus makes. So we'll go back to verse 10, and there's a little phrase about the new self, who we are when we follow Jesus. And Paul says it's about being renewed. Notice that. It says being renewed. In other words, we're not there yet. If we follow Jesus, doesn't matter whether we're little or big, young or old, if we follow Jesus, well, we're a work in progress. We're not there yet. Well, I'm not. You might be, but I'm not. And I think back a few days, talking with John, my 90-year-old cousin, who's been following Jesus for, I suppose, not far off a century now. He knows he's not there yet. He's rejoicing now that Ruth is. But it's clear that Jesus makes a difference to him. Last week, later on, someone reminded me of the amazing words that Jesus spoke to his disciples when he said he gave them the new commandment to love one another. That's it. That's the difference he makes. Well, so what? Well, how about this? It would be so easy sometimes, when it's so easy to badmouth someone or to tell a story that makes someone look bad or silly, how about this week stopping a moment and thinking, I follow Jesus. I follow Jesus, and then thinking, what's the kind, what's the loving thing to say? Or maybe even just realizing it's best to shut up and say nothing more, which is what I'm going to do right now.